I'm Andrea Klim, and you are watching Turn to the Stars, and today is March 17th, 2015, and happy St. Patrick's Day to all the Irish people out there. I just want to remind everyone that who watch this show, it is mainly about astrology, and astrology is not something that we believe in. It really is something that we learn about. It shows us the influences of our surrounding neighbors here on Earth from the solar system that we live in. And so it's not something we believe in. And I just like to remind people about that because I hear that all the time. Oh, astrology, I don't believe in that. Well, do you believe in the world you live in, or do you believe about the energy that surrounds you in the world you live in? So, it is a very real thing. And next on the agenda today, I'm going to be talking on the show about astrology, the forecast for March of 2015. In a past show, I talked a lot about the solar eclipse that's coming up on March 20th. I'm going to talk about that again today in further detail. But first, I do want to say thank you to all the supporters and all the people who came out to Turn to the Stars Psychic and Holistic Fair this past weekend on March 14th, our 28th Holistic Fair. And it was a really fun, exciting, enlightening day for everybody. And so I wanted to say a big thank you to all the participants and all the people who came and got readings, healing therapies, and visited our holistic vendors. Thanks again. And I want to just let you know our next fair is going to be on May 30th with some exciting new additions, a whole new room that we're going to be utilizing at the yard for holistic vendors and healing therapies. So we invite you to write that on your calendar, May 30th, our 29th fair. And pulling it back to talk about the topics I'm going to be talking about on today's show. I'm going to be talking about, I just want to review what happened this past Saturday on March 14th at 1:43 a.m. Saturn turned retrograde in the constellation of Sagittarius and is going to remain in that backward inner contemplation of truth area until August 2nd at 1:48 a.m. EST, when it is at 28 degrees in the constellation of Scorpio. So we're going to take one more pass, one more backward look. It's not so much a backward look, but a review for the third time of an area that we've already experienced and traveled. So if there's any of those shadows that are left behind of, possibly what we might call things that need to have some type of transformation or, something that we need to shed our skin from, maybe a shadow or a fear from the past that's still not quite healed within us. That'll be revisited through the Scorpio energy between, this present time and August. And also today, March 17th, is the seventh square between Uranus and in Aries, in that constellation, in Pluto and Capricorn. That actually occurred at 5:15 a.m. this morning here in Manchester, New Hampshire. And that seventh square, I'm going to talk about that today, how that affects us. The next, I'm going to be talking about the total solar eclipse supermoon in the constellation of Pisces that occurs this Friday, March 20th at 5:01 a.m., and the spring equinox that also occurs on Friday, March 20th at 6:44 p.m. That's when the sun moves to 0 degrees Aries, and we start a whole new astrological year. Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. We spring into spring, so to speak. And the first thing I want to show you today is a picture of the chart for the solar eclipse, which is March 20th, this Friday, as I said before, at 5:01 a.m., and you can see it highlighted there in blue. And we see a solar eclipse when, we see it's like a super new moon. And this one is really, really spectacular because it is a total solar eclipse. We cannot see it here on this side of the world. However, we still do feel the effects. We see an eclipse actually occurs when the sun or the moon is nearest one of the lunar nodes. And if you look, it looks like a horseshoe down to the left side of the chart, and it has red numbers 9 and the symbol for Aries. That's the south node of the moon, and it's interesting because this is a very primal solar eclipse, meaning that the primal side of us, or the animal side of us, has like an open door. Things from the past are going to surface. Things that we thought we had dealt with, that we had figured out from the past, are going to rise up. And the thing I want to remind you about is that things are in a different place than they were 19 years ago when we saw this same solar eclipse. Solar eclipses are about our identity. So I'm going to talk in depth on the show about this solar eclipse and that south node, what that means, and why it's important to consider and understand these past experiences as they rise up to into our lives in different ways. Want to talk about this eclipse from a standpoint of boundaries. Very, very important. Pisces, 29 degrees, is what we call a critical degrees. And Pisces is that one sign that it is so important that we understand what healthy boundaries are. So I'm going to be talking about that during today's show. First, I want to talk about a scientific, just discuss the scientific explanation of what actually the conditions are surrounding an eclipse. And according to Wikipedia, eclipses may occur when the Earth and the Moon are aligned with the Sun, and the shadow of one body cast by the Sun falls on the other. And so basically, as you saw on that chart earlier, the Sun and the Moon are together, so it's a new moon. When the moon is conjunct, or what we call right beside the sun, the moon may pass in front of the sun as seen from a narrow region on the surface of the earth and cause a solar eclipse. On a full moon, when the moon is opposite the sun, the moon may pass through the shadow of the earth, and a lunar eclipse is visible from the right half of the earth. So I'm going to be talking about the total lunar eclipse today also, that occurs on April 4th. So again, from a scientific standpoint, conjunction, that means beside each other, and opposition of the moon together have a special name, which they call syzygy. And from Greek, the Greek explanation or description of syzygy is junction. Because of the importance of these lunar phases, an eclipse does not happen at every new or full moon. We know that. So, because the plane of the orbit of the moon around the Earth is tilted with respect to the plane of the orbit of the Earth around the Sun, which is the ecliptic. So as seen from Earth, when the moon is nearest to the Sun, which is what we're going to have on Friday on that solar eclipse, new moon, or at the largest distance, which is the full moon, the three bodies usually are not exactly on the same line. So this inclination is on average about 5 degrees and 9 minutes larger than the apparent mean diameter of the Sun, which is 32 and 2. The moon as seen from the Earth from the surface of the earth right beneath the moon, and the shadow of the earth at the mean lunar distance. So therefore, at most new moons, the earth passes too far north or south of the lunar shadow, and at most full moons, the moon misses the shadow of the earth. So an eclipse is a very important event. Also, some more facts. At most solar eclipses, the apparent angular diameter of the moon is insufficient to fully obscure the solar disk, unless the moon is nearest its perigee, which is closer to the Earth and apparently larger than the average. So this is what we have occurring this Friday. A total solar eclipse, perigee, supermoon, close to the Earth. It's 30% closer, 30% energetically stronger. Very, very important eclipse. In any case, the alignment must be close to perfect to cause an eclipse. And another fact is an eclipse can only occur when the moon is close to the plane of the orbit of the Earth. And that is basically when its ecliptic latitude is small. So this happens when the moon is near one of the two nodes of its orbit, as you heard me say before, on the ecliptic at the time of the syzygy. So, of course, to produce an eclipse, the sun must also be near a node, a lunar node at the time. The same node for a solar eclipse or the opposite node for a lunar. So the solar eclipse is going to be closest to the south node, lunar node on this eclipse, which is what I described earlier. South node means comfort level, things from the past surfacing for our spirit to recognize, understand. It is a marker that there is change coming in our lives. And this marker presents a theme wherever it shows up in your chart, in your birth chart, or the transiting chart around your birth chart, is going to tell us what part of your life is going to go through an incredible change over the course of the next 6 months. And as you heard me say earlier, these eclipses go in a 19-year cycle. And I have the chart of 19 years ago to show you. This is 19 years ago when the same exact degree solar eclipse occurred, and this was on March 19th of 1996. And as you can see, if you look down from the highlighted area of this chart where you see the sun and the moon together, conjunct Saturn, Mars, and Mercury, all in the constellation of Pisces, the same degree as this eclipse that is occurring this Friday, we see the south node again, closest to this new moon solar eclipse. And it's interesting because this south node eclipse is just a little bit different than the one that we're having this Friday. The one we're having this Friday is actually more primal. It's going to really reach to the depths of our being and to shed some light for resolve and understanding, whereas this one brings up the Martian or the primal and the spirit side. So back 19 years ago, it was just a little bit different. However, when we look at this chart versus this Friday's, the eclipse is at the same exact degrees, 29, which is a critical degrees of Pisces. And 19 years ago, it's interesting, if I could put that chart up again, which is the 19 years ago, you can see at the very top of this chart, we see Pluto in Sagittarius at almost the same degrees as we currently, if I could put up the chart of the eclipse for this Friday, solar eclipse. At the top here, a little to the left, we see Saturn at 4 degrees of Sagittarius. This is a very interesting parallel that I'm seeing with these two charts. Both Pluto, so Pluto being at the same degrees almost in the constellation as Sagittarius as Saturn is on this Friday. It's really interesting because the difference is that Pluto rips away what's on the surface. So if you think about what was going on in your life 19 years ago, it may have been extremely powerfully a very transitional time in your life where there were things that were changing at a very intensely powerful rate. I know they were in my life. That was a year that my whole life changed, 1996. It was devastating in many ways, but what got ripped away on the surface allowed for me to really get to know the truth of who I was and to learn how to speak my truth and how to be forthright and more direct. And that's been something I've been working on all of this time. The difference is now we have Saturn in Sagittarius this time, and this says through contemplation. Use the wisdom you've gained to discover the truth and work carefully with your experiences this time around. Saturn is a planet that does carry wisdom that comes from the work we've done through the experiences we've had in our life. So there is a difference. Pluto can be extremely devastating, even if it is in a good aspect to something in your chart. If that placement in your chart is a stress spot, then you're going to go through some incredibly transitional times. One of the things that Saturn does on this eclipse that's coming up this Friday reminds us that discipline is necessary. It does offer you a protective shield, and my recommendation is to use that shield. And one of the things I found in preparing for today's show is I found this a quote by Aldous Leonard Huxley, and he says, "Experience is not what happens to a man. It is what a man does with what happens. It is what a man does with what happens to him." So what you do with what happens to you is very important. We have these experiences, but we should contemplate on how we manage what comes our way. And the other thing I thought about that is very closely describes this eclipse is one of my friends, Marjorie Chappelle, said this to me about a month ago. She goes, she said that the insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result. And that's an interesting thing too, because if we continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over and we don't learn from them, it's a critical time right now to look at how we can make these changes, how we can set some healthy boundaries. And there's one other quote that I wanted to bring up, and this one's by Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist follower, practitioner, and she said, "Nothing ever goes away until it has taught us what we need to know." So if you're having similar experiences as you had in 1996, I want to remind you they're coming up only to remind you that this is part of your soul's path. And you perhaps need to exercise some of that wisdom that you've gained along the way, especially from 19 years ago. And I want to discuss with you some deeper talk about some of the influence of this Pisces energy through this eclipse. Because certainly if there is things that people haven't resolved in their life, which are really deeply seated emotionally, we're going to probably see those things surface, because the time is critical for them to get some clarity and understanding about these things. And as I said before, boundaries, 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 so important. what are our visions? Pisces is the energy of Pisces is about it's a very spiritual energy, a very sensitive energy, a very gentle energy, but also can be a very confused energy. So if you're experiencing confusion with that Saturn influence on this eclipse, might be time to contemplate and do some legwork and become more active in understanding what's behind this, what's at the depth, or what's at the root of this. The other thing is make-believe. Make-believe, is very strong with a Pisces influence. And also the victimhood. People thinking, I'm being victimized by this. And I always call it wearing the V glasses, or victim mentality. I'm a victim. And there's a different way of looking at this. There's this duality about this Pisces energy. And the dual forces that are at work here is one is bringing the truth, and the other is bringing resolve. So if you're feeling like you're the victim of some type of experience, perhaps it's time to step back and say, what can I learn from this? What can I take from this? Am I really a victim, or is this just an experience I'm having, and I just need to slow down and contemplate and try to find some peace within myself through this experience, or with this experience. And Pisces energy is interesting because it can be very obsessive, and drama can be really big with it as well. What also can be really healing during this time is music, and showing some compassion for others who are suffering, but very important to remember the boundaries. We don't want to give away our souls in order for somebody else to not feel like a victim. Perhaps help teach them. Here's another Saturn influence. Teach them what you've learned, or offer what you've learned as a way to help them through this time of change. And certainly, remember, the next 6 months is going to be the sort of playground where this energy of change plays out in your life. The theme that's being set now, March 20th, we have March 20th, probably around April 20th, May 20th, June 20th, July 20th. This is the 6-month path of these themes, of this theme that's being presented on this eclipse, growing and shaping, and the experiences that you have in your life. Probably around June is when we're really going to feel like we've got a firm understanding, and that things are really starting to come together in our lives wherever this change took place. And it's interesting because, as I talked about before, this is a critical degrees of Pisces. And it's critical that we make amends, find peace, be compassionate, yet in the same token, utilize healthy boundaries around unhealthy experiences. Neptune in Pisces is also different on this eclipse than it was in 1996. In this eclipse, it's beside Mercury and Chiron, so it's time for resolve and a deep understanding of the forces at play deep within us, and they'll be evident along with the wounds that are seeking some type of remedy for healing. So Mercury is the mind. In Pisces, it's very mystical, not so logical. So there's this kind of dreamy type of thought, kind of energy that's surrounding us. And Chiron is saying wherever that wound is, there is a key to healing that's present at this time if you reach for it. Pisces eclipse is an eclipse which tells us of a spiritual consciousness, that it's time to shift out of our left brain linear thought and take care of what our intuition and our heart is telling us. This solar eclipse has the potential to widen the doors of our perception. I usually find that some of the best psychics are people with Pisces energy, because there's such a depth that they can see if they have clear vision. And what this solar eclipse can offer is insight into times when we're, it can bring us a sense of calm. And I'd highly recommend that Friday, at least Friday, that you take some time to have some inner reflection, some quiet time, some calm time, so that you can receive some of the messages that are coming through this Pisces eclipse. And really, they're coming through the depths of our consciousness and the heights of our consciousness. And so Friday would be a great day to spend some time in quiet meditation, shamanic journeying, walking in nature, artistic creations, anything that takes you away from the loud, hurried volume of your regular earth life. This solar eclipse does carry a power to deliver a clear, visualized direction, and the 29 degrees indicates that the critical nature of what we feel, what we experience on this day is very, very important. And the message is going to be the strongest for the mutable signs of the zodiac, which are Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo. And any planets that you have in your birth chart that are between 27 degrees of any sign and 2 degrees of any zodiac sign will also be most affected by this eclipse. And as I said before, for the next 6 months. So look to see what area of your chart this eclipse occurs in. That is what house. And you'll gain an understanding of what's coming. Just a little bit of helpful insight. Squares. If you have a square to any planets in your chart, be careful about being a martyr and your inner need to please others. Oppositions. Expect the unexpected. Things coming out of nowhere. You have no choice but to do what you can about what you can. I call this divine guidance when there's an opposition by an eclipse or a powerful planet to any planet in a chart. We're given what we need. It's not always what we wanted. If you have a trine to any planet in your chart, even if it's well aspected, this is a time of open doors, success, ease, and harmony. So, but do beware, if this trine is to a planet that is stressed, this is an open door for the karma to be experienced. So this would require assistance and guidance. So I want to say to everyone who's watching Turn to the Stars, thank you for all your support. I do appreciate it, and I didn't really get to talk about the total lunar eclipse, but I'll be doing that next week. That is on April 4th, total lunar eclipse, very important. So turn to the stars and you will find your answers there. Until next time, take good care. I'll see you then.